We're going to remove the wheel, use a 22mm socket, take the lug nuts off. And pull the wheel off. We're going to loosen up this jam nut. Use a 15/16 wrench or a 24mm. Just break it free like that. Before I take this nut off, I'm just going to use some rust penetrant and just soak it down a little bit. Now I'm just going to take a pry bar and just pry down on the top part of the tie rod and underneath the lower strut. And take an 18mm socket. As I'm prying down, loosen up the nut and take it off. Now to separate the outer tie rod from the knuckle, I'm just going to take a hammer and tap on the bottom part. Just tap it up. There we go. Because this tie rod's a little bit on the tight side, I'm going to use some locking pliers on the inner tie rod. And then we're going to loosen this tie rod up. So spin it, and you want to count the threads. So that was 1, and then 2, 17, 18, about 18 turns, so you want to write that number down. Still with the locking pliers on the inner tie rod, I'm going to use a 24mm socket. Take this nut off. Now we're going to remove the locking pliers. Take some hose clamp pliers, and we're going to remove this outer hose clamp. Slide it off. Now we're going to remove this inner boot. There is a clamp on the inside that's hard to see. I have a pick right here, and I need to separate where the clamp is. And just try to pry that out a little bit. And most of the time you don't reuse the clamp. If it doesn't get damaged too much, you can reuse it. Just going to use a pick on the outside here just to try to get this to pop off. Try not to rip it because we're going to reuse the boot. There we go. And just slide it off. Take some locking pliers, and if you can fit them in here, you want to get this on the shaft behind the inner tie rod end, just so that the steering shaft doesn't spin as you're loosening it up. Do the best you can. And if you don't have a lot of room in here, you can turn the wheel in the direction where the tie rod pushes out. So grab the other side wheel and push it this way. And lock that on. That's good. Take an inner tie rod tool, find the right adapter that fits. Slide that in position. And lock it in place. And loosen it up while holding the locking pliers. Do the best you can with that. There we go. And there we go. Here's the old one. And there is a spacer, so you're gonna want to use that spacer for the new one. Take this old spacer and just slide it over that shaft, and take the inner tie rod and just slide it in position. Get it started by hand. And take the tie rod tool, the correct adapter, line that up. Slide it in position. And use the torque wrench and torque this to 74 foot-pounds. That's good. You can take this tool off, take your locking pliers off. Now we're going to take the boot. Now normally if this clamp is broken, you're going to want to put a new clamp on, or you could use a wire tie and just be able to tighten it down real tight. What you would normally do is use a tool like this to crimp this down, but because of the location of the boot, it's not easy to get in there. So I'm going to do the best I can with using some side cutters and just being careful not to cut this and tightening it down that way. So take the boot, just take a little bit of grease and just put it on this end. You don't need grease on that end. And slide it over the tie rod. And just slide it in position. And I'm actually going to turn the wheel on the other side to pull this in a little bit. Just get that to line up and push it on. Now that's on all the way. Now I'll just try to tighten this down from here. I have to twist this a little bit. Do the best you can with this. There we go. It's a little bit easier to get it at the bottom. It's on there, and just snug it up. And just make sure that's not too loose. Really can't spin that easily, so that's good. Now take this clamp and your hose clamps. Try to line this up. And just slide it in position. And that's good. Now you can put the jam nut on. And that's good right there. Take the outer tie rod and get this started and count the threads. So that was 1, 2, 17, 18. So wherever you had it, tighten the tie rod on that many turns. That'll just make it closer when the vehicle goes to get aligned. It's not as far out. Now take the tie rod, line it up with the knuckle. And slide it down. And then take the castle nut and get that started underneath. All right. Now use a pry bar. Just pry down on the tie rod. I'm just gonna snug up the nut a little bit before we torque it. Not too tight. Now use a torque wrench and torque this to 26 foot-pounds, and then you can use an angle meter and torque this an additional 30 degrees. If you don't have an angle meter, just do the best you can. Then take the cotter pin and slide it into the tie rod. And if it doesn't line up, you can tighten the nut just slightly more just to get it to line up. A little more. That's good. Take some side cutters. And just bend the cotter pin down. Fold it over, and you can trim the excess. Now tighten this jam nut down If you have the ability to torque it, use a torque wrench and torque that to 50 foot-pounds, or do the best you can. Now install the wheel. Just grab those lug nuts and put the lug nuts on. Now I'm going to torque the lug nuts to 111 foot-pounds in a cross pattern or a star pattern to tighten the wheel down evenly. I'll just go around again, double check. You want to keep in mind that after you've done this job, you need to take the vehicle to a local garage and have it aligned. You don't want to have premature tire wear.